And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Peter Holbrook, the class of 1962. Dr. Holbrook graduated from Yale University and the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. He served in the Air Force. He was a professor at George Washington University. He is the author of many texts and journals. He established the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit at National Medical Center. He recently retired from his position as Chief Medical Officer. The Peter Holbrook Endowed Lectureship in Critical Care Medicine was named in his honor, recognizing his contributions in clinical practice and groundbreaking research. It's my pleasure, and I ask you to welcome back York graduate Dr. Peter Holbrook.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. My first decision was my best one, and that is when I selected my parents. Am I not pushing the right button? There we are. My father, John, was an engineer by training. He was a frustrated doctor, but he was an engineer by training, and he dedicated himself to finding out how things worked and then to fixing them. My mother was a Scandinavian descendant and taught me to do the right thing, to figure out what the right thing was and to do the right thing. My dad was elected to the school board here in 1960, I believe it was. Some would say that was to get my older brother graduated, but others would not agree with that opinion. My older brother did graduate. He's a whole lot smarter than I am, and he's still alive and doing well. My father's politics were to the right of Genghis Khan, and it is not surprising that immediately after he joined the school board, we began an austerity program here at this institution, and it persisted. He got Dr. R. Bruce Allingham straight, and everything worked well from that time on. I started out as a trumpet player like Mr. Hagstrom did. Many years ago, my success was slightly less impressive, and I was invited to switch instruments to the tuba when I was in the 7th grade. That actually turned out to be one of the better decisions of my life, because I was beating my head against the door or against the wall playing the trumpet, and the tuba had much less competition, and it was a great thing for me because I went on and I was very involved in the band here at York, where the band at that time and probably still was extremely talented band. We went to a lot of contests, we had a lot of fun times, learned a lot of music, and I'm forever running into things that I played in the band. Laverne Reamer was the director at that time, and he was a strict disciplinarian but an outstanding person. While I was at York, I was an okay student. I was an A-B student. I pride myself on never having received straight A's in my entire career. I was regularly matched with people who were much smarter than I am. People like Anderson and Schuler, Landwehr, Anderman, Davenport, Homiak, and the like, many of whom I still stay in touch with. Carson Schuler's here in the audience, and he always humiliates me by his photographic memory and his ability to remember everything. Ron Reinke and Dan Millsap, who are here in the audience, taught me how to play basketball, although not very successfully. Both Shelley Thompson and Chloe Cody Berg taught me how to deal with striving to achieve the unattainable. Both of those beautiful women were in our class, and they were outstanding people. I went on from here to Yale, and at Yale, I'm pleased to say that York High School competed very well. Jim Landwehr also went with me, and so did Don Anderman. We were very successfully integrated into the program. There were 43 students from New Trier that year. I met a few of them. I didn't know them all. We were certainly very competitive. We certainly understood what was going on. The educational levels here was very comparable to that, as it was to the schools in the East, such as Andover Academy, where one John Carey was in our class, and we certainly outcompeted John Carey in terms of academic successes. It's a little known fact, George Bush, who came along 2 years later, actually had a higher grade point average at Yale than John Carey did. But nonetheless, they've all gone in their own directions. I moved on to the University of Pennsylvania Medical School, and while I was there, I got a part-time job at the Children's Hospital. I didn't know it at the time, but the intensive care unit at that hospital had just opened its doors about 3 months earlier, and I came in as a nursing assistant, and so I got right in at a very early stage on one of the earliest pediatric intensive care units in the country. For a medical student, the experience was extraordinary, and I just was totally absorbed into everything that was going on. In the center of this picture, you see a baby who is in obviously a great deal of distress here. IV pumps and things like that are to each side. This is actually a machine that didn't exist at that time. This is a more modern picture. That's an ECMO machine, which means extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. We pull the blood out of the child and treat it chemically with the machine and put it back in, and it thereby replaces the lungs. It's an extremely difficult procedure and the like, but still it was very stimulating, very interesting. This is what I did during medical school. However, I noticed at that time that there was a discrepancy in the care that was delivered to certain patients in the intensive care unit. If the patient was lucky enough to have a disease that was entirely consistent with an existing medical specialty, they generally did fine because the specialist knew exactly what to do with everything that was going wrong with the child. However, if they had the bad fortune to have complications that went outside of the organ system boundary that existed at that time, then there was potential for trouble. And for one group of patients who came in with multisystemic disease, such as near drownings or motor vehicle accidents and things like that, there were no specialists prepared to take care of those patients. And so I said, that's not what we want to do. So I began to, at a later stage in my career, after I went through pediatrics training at Johns Hopkins, to learn about how to take care of critically ill children because they were critically ill, not because they had a particular organ system that was failing. That was a controversial opinion at that point in time. However, it was the right opinion, and with a lot of work, we convinced a lot of people that that was the right way to do things. I was involved in all aspects of that, including getting to the point of getting certification for people who were specialists in that, and there are now over 1,800 specialists in pediatric critical care, whereas there were none when we began. So it's been a great road at that time. At the end of 20 years or so of that, I began to seek new challenges, and I went into administration. I may have buggered it when I fell. All right, there we are. In the medical world, this is called going to the dark side. I became an administrator, and I was the chief medical officer at Children's National Medical Center for about 17 years. I had 500 physicians who were directly employed by me, and I learned the value of my psychiatric training from earlier. It's a challenge dealing with so many outstanding egos. I stepped down from that position about 2 years ago, and I have now been embarked on a period that is summarized in the Kierkegaard quote, which if you can advance that for me. Life can only be understood backwards, but unfortunately you have to live it forwards. So now I'm in that period where I'm beginning to look backwards, and I'm trying to understand life. I've been engaged in two major activities. One is to fill in the knowledge gaps, and believe me, there are many. After you devote your life to a medical career, there are lots and lots and lots of things that you don't know anything about, and I've been filling in a lot of those gaps. And I've also been asking myself, why are the problems, some of the problems that I encountered when I began my medical career 40 years earlier, still present, despite the fact that people are working very hard on solving those. And I think I've learned some of the solutions to that, and I won't go into great detail on this, but if I could have the next slide. Some of the things that I believe are true is that we are simply and absolutely drowning in information. Just to give you some statistics on this, from about 200 AD up until the invention of the printing press and the movable type, a body of knowledge accumulated. That was written knowledge. With the Gutenberg printing press, that amount of written material doubled in the first 50 years after the press. Now it has doubled and doubled and doubled and doubled and doubled many times, and it now doubles every 18 months. Similarly put, the knowledge that has been accumulated and published increases at approximately Moore's Law, which is the equivalent of every 18 months to 2 years. We double the amount of knowledge that comes into the world. We can't process that. We don't know how to process that, but the way we do, which is very unfortunate, is we isolate ourselves into knowing more and more about less and less, so that we dig deeper, deeper silos. We have our own language, we have our own knowledge base. We generally exclude people from other silos, and we're digging ourselves terrible holes. The ultimate progression of that, you know more and more about less and less until you know everything about nothing. And you're unable to communicate with anybody who knows anything else in the other silo. This is a tremendous problem, and we need to find this. Similarly, our system, our very system, overvalues specialization. If I can pick on college for a little bit, college athletics, Ron, forgive me, but my daughter was a gifted athlete when she was in high school, and she was selected to be an All-American lacrosse player from the state of Delaware. Excuse me. She specifically did not want to go to a school, a college, where she was an athlete first and a student second. She wanted to be a student first and an athlete second, but she wanted to go to the best one that she could find. She went to a Division III school. Guess what? Their training program was precisely the same as the Division I schools, because the Division III coaches wanted to be the best coaches they could be. So she ended up hating lacrosse within a year and leaving it. That's an example of the hyper-specialization on the athletic basis. Now, I would submit to you that we have the same kind of problem excuse me, in the academic world, where the earlier a person commits to a field and gets deeper into the field, publishes in that field, they get sucked into the vortex at an earlier time, and the opportunity cost of that is that they lose the ability to understand things in other areas as well. So I am working on trying to figure solutions to those things, especially if we can find elements of the big picture. There is one element that I think is positive, and there's a concept out that is now extant in the world, and it's called big history. Next slide, please. Big history. This is one of the great courses on big history. It runs in 48 lectures. It runs from the Big Bang all the way to the modern era. Next slide, please. And here, the concept in this historical course is that everything we do goes through a series of increasing complexity. The first threshold was the Big Bang, then the formation of stars, then the formations of elements, then the formation of Earth, then life itself. afterlife. We had humanoids who began to evolve. Then we got to agriculture, and now we got to the modern era. The modern era being harder to specifically describe since we already are living in that. I was so impressed with this course that I have put a copy of this in the York High School library because it was the kind of course that I wish I had seen when I was here. The field of big history didn't exist at that time, but I'm hoping that people will see it and see how things can be brought together. In summary here, I owe a great deal, next slide please, to this institution. Many of the people who were my revered teachers at that time have passed on and gone to other locations, and so I don't want to do a laundry list of names and things like that, but suffice it to say this is an extraordinary place. I'm very proud to be here, and thank you very much for this award.